Okay, is everyone back? More or less. Jesus and I thought we would spend the next half an hour just talking to you guys about our desires for the next few years, the next 5 years really, what we would like to do and how we're approaching sharing God's truth on earth. So on this trip, we are going to 7 countries and we're teaching for 35 days in a 4-month period. We're not going to ever do that again. It's way too much, and it's just we don't have enough time to process our own feelings as we're going, because we're setting up a venue, doing an event, packing it all up, packing ourselves up, moving to a new location, getting ourselves set up there, sorting out our accommodation, getting our shopping, setting up the new venue, doing the event, shifting. So you can see, because we're doing pretty much every weekend in 4 months, we just haven't allowed enough time for ourselves. So we're not going to do that again. However,
for a while at least.
Well, yeah, until we're at one with God, and then we'll be able to do it. Yeah. But what our heart's desire is to be able to spend more time with people around the world discussing God's truth. Because when we get to discuss these things in person, it becomes more personal, doesn't it? Even if we're just talking about principles, it becomes more personal to yourself. And what we've found over the years is that many people have watched many, sometimes hundreds of, even thousands of hours of videos, and then they meet us once and go, oh, this is nothing like what I thought, or I thought I was here and you're telling me I'm over here. And so we want to help people form their relationship with God as quickly as possible. And so we can see that having more face-to-face time with people is going to benefit them. So what we want to do each year, Jesus says I have to get better at writing on the whiteboard. Well, let's say in 2025, what we would like to do, how we would like to spend our time, is to spend 4 months, just like we're doing now, 4 months traveling overseas. But the way we would do it differently is just to visit fewer locations and have longer times at each location. So we would come to Europe and we'd maybe be in England. At the moment, what we're thinking of is England and Portugal, and spending maybe a month in each place, or 3 weeks and 7 weeks, depending on how it would work. My maths is wrong there. 3 weeks and 5 weeks. 3 weeks in England, 5 weeks in Portugal, or some ratio of that, where we end up spending 8 to 10 weeks in Europe. And then that's right, I'm right. And then we move on to North America. So on this trip, we're visiting Canada and the USA, and potentially we would like to do that again, and just have, again, just the 2 stops. So 1 place in the USA and 1 place in Canada, or perhaps in Brazil. We've also been invited to go back to Brazil. So perhaps we would have 1 stop in Brazil and 1 in Canada or the US. But basically less stops, with more time in each location. Hopefully and we would try to make those locations close to a central hub. It's a bit difficult because everywhere we go that's more a central hub, the venues become more expensive. But we do understand that for anyone traveling, it makes your expenses less, because you don't have to hire a car or find us somewhere out in the middle of the English countryside. You can come to the airport and come to the event. So, yeah, we're still figuring out exactly where and exactly how long. But our desire is to do that 4 months overseas every year for the next 4 or 5 years. Yeah. The only caveat to that, of course, is that we have to receive enough donations to do it. Yeah. And yeah, we need to find the locations and hopefully because ultimately in 10 years, what we would like to do is to be able to have centres around the world where people can come and take part in activities and experience what it's like to do things in harmony with God's principles. So what we're also establishing while we're doing this in Australia is a non-profit organisation which has been established now for how many years, Darwin?
8.
8 years?
Yeah.
Yep, so let's say 4 months overseas. Then in Australia, what we want to do is split our time of 2 months travelling, doing a similar thing with people face to face, and the remaining 6 months we're spending at home helping to grow the God's Way organisation. So this organisation, as Jesus said, has been established for a number of years now, and basically it's a not-for-profit company that was founded by people other than us. Jesus wrote the constitution for it and was very heavily involved in helping people understand.
It was sort of founded by us though. But
well, we are the founding members,
yeah.
I suppose, but in terms of, yeah, true.
There were other people involved in it too.
Yeah. Setting up the organisation, the legalities of the organisation and so on. But basically it's based on having practical areas of development, of expansion, provision of services that is all done as much as possible in harmony with God's laws on earth. So it's a really great aim. It's still really in its infancy, but what we would really love to do is set up centres around the world where people can come and have these same experiences as they're having in God's Way in Australia at the moment. So in God's Way in Australia at the moment, we have a number of properties that the company has already been gifted. So everything that the company has received has really pretty much been gifted, hasn't it?
Everything, yeah.
Yeah. How many acres of land is there now?
There's 4 different properties, a total of 1,000 acres of land. So what's that, about 400 hectares around about?
Yeah.
There's also bulldozer, excavator, tractor, trailers. We gifted our own vehicles to God's Way as well. So vehicles Mary and I used to own, now owned by God's Way. Eventually, God's Way will probably also own our own property, actually.
Yeah.
There's also things like God's Way has a website called godsway.net.
Yeah, I'll put that.
And also everything that God's Way has purchased has all been from gifts that it's received as well.
So we haven't really purchased the land or the machine, it's all been gifted. I suppose we have purchased a little bit of the equipment from gifted funds.
Yeah.
And basically in God's Way at the moment, the main focus is helping people to have this experience of doing things in harmony with God's laws and building a team of people who are really humble, who are really seeking truth in their lives, who really have this strong desire to love others and give gifts to others. And once we have that team of people together, at the moment there's 3 people on that team who are pretty solidly in that way of life, and they are the current directors of God's Way. So you will, maybe some of you have heard of Eloisa Sparks and Cornelius, who's another one of the 14, and Phoebe Bruce is the 3rd director at the moment. And while we're away, they're running things on the ground in Wilkesdale, where we live, building things and so on, but running events and days for people to come and participate in giving gifts. So there's no point coming if you don't have a desire to give gifts, but also giving people that experience of what it's like to participate in a group or a team trying to get something done in harmony with God's laws. Now, a number of you have been out there to participate in that. Who's been out? Yeah, quite a few of you. Yeah. All with varying experiences, haven't you? Challenging in one way or another. Yes. Yeah. But if you're sincere about your growth towards God, they're the kind of challenges you need to see where you're really at in relation.
So we're trying to help people in practice with their humility in particular.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that most people have problems with, their humility. And so that's what we're trying to work on at the moment, mostly with people who visit.
Yeah, yeah. So basically our desire is to help God's Way, the organisation, to grow, because it has some ideals that we obviously share, which is to not only give people this experience of participating in an organisation that is working to have things run as God's laws run, have laws that reflect God's laws on earth, but also there's already activities in terms of environmental recovery that's the main kind of other work of God's Way at the moment is construction and environmental recovery. And obviously we want to find loving ways to build things and to recover a lot of the environmental damage that's going on earth at the moment.
So it's not meant to be like a community. A lot of people think, are we creating a community? No, that's not its goal. Its goal is to firstly find people who are living their entire life in harmony with God's Way. Secondly, a part of the goal is to create a location where we can actually eventually build auditoriums. So we can have places where God's truth are being taught every week by people who we feel are qualified to do so. And so the principles of God's truth being taught every week, as well as there being a lot of practical experiences, which like humility and practice days that we have, to give you practical examples of those teachings and how they look in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So that's the general goal of the God's Way organisation.
Because what we would love is if we can find a framework for building an auditorium. So we're calling them learning centres in God's Way. So they're not a community. If there's going to be anyone living on those centres, it would be very few, and they would be in sort of a caretaker or management role. But it's
Or a teaching role.
Other than that, it's a place for people to come and have experiences, either to attend a seminar like you're attending or to participate in something that's quite constructive. So our ultimate goal would be overseas to have one or two of these centres, because then obviously...
Well, we're a centre in every continent, really.
Yeah. Yes, please. Let's have a centre in every continent.
As a minimum,
Yes. Because if you can imagine that, it would mean that we wouldn't have to deal with a lot of the logistics that we're currently dealing with when we move from place to place. There would be...
But it also can mean that other people who we feel are qualified to teach can move to place too. So you not only have sort of our teachings, but you also have their experience of our teachings being shared as well.
Yeah.
And so there gets to be a lot more than personal involvement possible with what's sort of going on in terms of trying to share God's truth with the world. Yeah.
When you're developing your relationship with God, it's very helpful to have people around you who are truthful, who are humble themselves, and who want to love. It's not essential, you can do it without that, but obviously it's easier if you have those experiences with people who are already further along in that relationship than yourself. It's quite supportive, you get more, not in an over-nurturing, addictive way, but in a way that helps you to see things that you might otherwise miss, to have faith that humility is possible, a lot of these things that we think can benefit people. So that's why we have these goals.
Now, the God's Way net.net website does have on it the Constitution, which is the governing laws of the God's Way Limited organisation. And anybody who's interested can download that Constitution. I think it might be a 50 or 60 page document outlining the way in which God's Way Limited as a company runs. And I wrote that Constitution. It's a legal document in Australia to define how the company should run in harmony with God's principles.
It's quite a beautiful document, and Jesus, put a lot of work into it really in the end, didn't you? Yeah. So, yes, what else? Does anyone have any questions about any of that?
So far?
Yeah. Anna?
Not so much a question, but I just want to big up God's Way, because it is just the most extraordinary organisation, what you guys and what the guys over there are doing.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful, and if anyone has the opportunity or the desire, just encourage anyone to go and have try and help. I mean, we
Yeah,
can't help
yeah.
that much at the moment, but
Yeah.
yeah, just wanted to pick you guys up.
Yeah, there's lots of different programs we're doing that have been, some of them environmental recovery, as Mary mentioned, others building. Obviously, we're heading towards, firstly, when it comes to the building side of the projects, we firstly water collecting, because in Australia we have to be responsible for our own water. And then after the water collection, we want to actually, so once we've got the water collection in place, then we can look at things like having a venue where people can actually visit. And then once we've got a venue in place, we can look at food production for the people who are teaching at the venue and stuff like that. So we've got a sort of a fairly structured approach to how we want to see things develop. And it's going to be very, very reliant on people in a good condition.
Yeah.
So, yeah. A good spiritual condition.
Yeah.
Tim and Phil.
I just want to ask if the donation box is in the back.
Oh,
Yes, we always forget to mention
it. We have a donation box at the back. The red box is a donation box for divinetruth.com, but we don't and we can't travel because we don't have enough space with us, with a donation box for godsway.net. So if you want to donate towards godsway.net, you'll have to get on the website and you will have to,
there's a tab
donation
called
tab
Donate
that allows people to donate, and there's different projects, and also every 3 months they update the financials and they let you know what the financial statement is. So they tell you what, and this has only just begun the last year or so, something we needed to sort out, and they tell you what projects they want to do, what projects are on hold because they don't have enough funds to do, and what the future projects are planned and things like that. So there's a whole lot of information, both financial and project-wise, that are all on the godsway.net site. If you want to donate to Mary and I, which is to do with us travelling and other things like that, anything donated to divinetruth.com is at the address Mary's writing, donate.divinetruth.com, if you want to donate to us and the work we do, and also we live off of donations as well, Mary and I. But if you want to donate to godsway.net, then there's all sorts of things you can donate towards there, like projects and equipment and all sorts of things. We don't like receiving old equipment because we've found that most of it breaks down, and then we're left with these terrible maintenance bills afterwards. So if you're going to donate things like equipment or other things, it has to be in good working order, not something that's a discard because it broke down for you or something like that. But also there's things we receive in God's Way with regard to donations include things that we might distribute to others. So in the future, one of the constitution requirements of God's Way is that it shares things physically with others, like a normal, like charity might do. But it is not a charity, I must point that out. It is in Australia, a charity doesn't have to pay tax, and we believe in paying tax. And the reason why we believe in paying tax is because it supports the environment you're living in through roads and other infrastructure. And so godsway.net pays tax as well. So anything where it gets profit, or also in Australia there's goods and services tax, and these things God's Way does pay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we should say that no one in God's Way draws a wage or an income, and they're the directors themselves, Jesus and myself, and a couple of others work exceptionally hard to keep that organisation running.
Yeah, full time.
Yeah.
And the way they live is by people donating to them directly. So you'll also see on our website and on the God's Way website, not on the God's Way website, you will also, if you want to, so people like Cornelius, Eloisa and Phoebe, they live off donations people give them too. So if you want to help one of them to keep doing the job they're doing, you can donate to them directly, and each one of them has their own website set up so you can donate to them directly.
And there's possibly a link on our website to their website, isn't there?
There's a link on our website, on the Divine Truth website,
divinetruth.com.
under donations to others or something, I think it is, where if you hit the donation page, you'll see a pull down and you can select different pages, and one of them is donations to others. And in there's a list of the people who are currently the directors of God's Way, who are all working for free for God's Way, and also some other people who are supporting them working for free as well, who support us. And if you want to donate to them directly, you can. What we encourage people to do is to sort of eventually live the same life Mary and I live, which is relying on other people supporting you by giving them gifts firstly, and then other people wanting to support you in that process.
Yeah. And while we're on the subject of the website, Jesus and Kate, a friend of ours who was also a member of God's Way, were working very hard up until the early part of last year to upgrade our website, and they had done some beautiful work. I've seen the work that they've done. It looks very, very nice, but unfortunately, some of you would know that Kate passed away in March, I think it was last year, and so that work hasn't...
Side effects from COVID and...
Yeah, she had an accident, and because she was sick with COVID and had a fall, and as a result she passed away. But as a result, the work on that website has not been finished, so still a bit dated, our divinetruth.com, but it works. Yeah.
And it'll probably stay its way until I can find another programmer who's as good as Kate.
Yeah.
And who is willing to live the same way Kate was living, because Kate was also living the same way. She was living by donations and living like the same way Mary and I live. So, and she was pretty much full time doing work for God's Way and Divine Truth.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing we need to continue a lot of those sort of things. If we received enough donations to get outside people to finish the design, then we would do that. There's some very specific requirements I had about the website, one of which is I want to be able to just copy it onto a disc, and everybody who gets the disc gets the website. And so to do that required quite a lot of different kind of programming than normal.
Yeah, because the new website has a search engine within it, so that because any of you who've tried to access stuff on the site, there's so much information there, so many hours, so many different topics. So the guys had designed a database where you could search for a very specific topic, and it would scan through all the transcripts of all the talks and find where that topic was talked about in all the different talks.
In the website that gets shared to everyone. Yeah. So that way you don't need to connect to a server, you don't need the internet to run it. Yeah. And the good thing about that is poor people who run it, people who don't have the same advantages you guys here have in England, because the internet is quite fast here in England compared to many other countries of the world. But that process is obviously on hold, and we may, if we got enough donations, we'd probably get it finished by an outside programmer. But my estimations, it's probably going to cost around about $150,000 to finish, given all of the things I want them to do, and we haven't got those funds obviously to do that.
Yeah. Now, who do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. Somebody asked me here about how to get involved with God's Way at one point, but I think I just directed them to the website and just encouraged them, if they want to be sort of self-responsible, they can find that.
Yeah. On godsway.net, there's a tab that is called Get Involved. And under that, there's another tab called Prerequisites for attendance. If you head there, it's going to give you the basics. You can also, on the blog part of the website, kind of read updates about different things that different people who've gotten involved have been doing and the different activities.
And you can also subscribe to the blog on the
website
as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say hello as well to all of our friends in Australia. It's so different going there and sort of spending time, getting a glimpse of a different life, and it's a very different feeling out there, and everyone's very loving, very direct, and it is very confronting, very honest, you know. But I would encourage anyone who's even thinking about it just to follow the desire.
It might mean obviously to create the same experience everywhere in the world. That's going to depend upon people with their development in love, you know, as to how soon that occurs.
And just be happy to keep your hand up.
About community, I would be really down to build or help build community, like a big community eventually maybe.
We don't want to.
We don't want to have a community.
No.
Not you, but like, you know, I would be, so to say. But
Yeah,
you don't want
we don't want to advertise that.
that.
We don't agree with it, actually.
Why wouldn't you?
Most people who are attracted to community are attracted because they want to avoid some form of responsibility in their own life.
Yeah.
They want to share the responsibility.
Not just that, we want you to go out into the world and share truth with the world. And if you're in a community, you're creating like a closed sort of system where that won't share things with the world. You'd be so involved with what you're doing, you'll almost forget the world.
Yeah.
And we don't agree with that purpose for a community.
So in God's way, even though the 3 directors and Jesus and myself are pretty much full-time in that organisation, there are many people who come on a weekly basis who have a different job in the community, who do other things, they're interacting.
Even people from the general community, like, they're all invited and can come anytime generally.
Yeah, so we've got pretty strong feelings about community and not...
we don't agree with it. What happens with community in the long run is that people in the same condition eventually finish up joining together and doing things. And you don't really feel like, I need to community to protect myself from the world, or, you know, to protect myself from what's going on in the world. You want to be part of what's going on in the world so that you can help the world change. And so the whole idea of, we feel the whole idea of community is not in harmony with God's principles of laws, actually. What's in harmony with God's principles of laws is a sharing of things based upon condition. So the law of attraction works perfectly in that regard. And so we don't feel we need to create a community, and we will never be creating a community.
You want to be able to be yourself in the world. Be yourself around others. Be yourself in whatever environment you're in. And very often communities are designed for people to sort of feel safe, in inverted commas, to be themselves. But actually that's avoiding the feeling that you don't feel you can be yourself.
So one day when we get the chance to talk to you about it in detail, which I'm sure we will, you'll see all the reasons why we feel such a thing is unloving.
I know in other talks you mentioned Portugal perhaps being a venue for an admin centre.
Yes.
Do you think there might be one in the UK?
We're not sure at this stage. There are a number of issues we see in the UK in terms of where the UK is headed that we feel makes the UK less attractive. A lot of those are to do with the general attitudes we see here developing. People from the UK have very, very high demands, and we see that those very high demands, once people don't get them met, result generally in more violence and also higher expectations from from other countries to support their economy and other things like that. In other words, what do you call it? Imperialistic view, which we see almost in every one of you, ironically, as well, as an emotional injury. And so, you know, we want our first learning centre in Europe to be more down to earth than that, more focused on just, you know, developing love in an environment that is physically a little tougher than perhaps here in the UK, because that gives us opportunity to show people how much damage has happened to the environment and how you can repair that damage. It also gives us an opportunity to help people with their imperialistic emotions as well and other things like that. So, but we're not against every country in the end having a centre. That's not but I'm just saying our initial goals are not as wide as that. You know, our initial goals is just to get something established which is close enough for people to get to, reasonably close enough for people to get to, but also can illustrate the principles. Because at this stage, many of you don't understand what is going to be required of the people who are running these centres. It's a very emotionally strenuous, initially particularly, thing to do. And it requires a deep level of humility. We give them constant feedback, obviously. It requires a deep level of humility, a deep level of trustworthiness as well, and a deep level of desire to work in harmony with the laws of the land, or the government, as well as the constitution of God's way, which is not opposed to the law of the government. And also, there's a lot of other considerations with regard to things like food production, the environment, how it's being damaged, what potentially might occur in terms of changes to the earth and how certain areas might be affected, and other things like that are a part of our considerations as to where we have a centre initially. Of course, in the long run, we'd like to see one in every country, you know, like, obviously, but that is not going to be feasible in the next 10 to 20 years, I would say. It's going to be a lot longer. And who knows, I might be dead by then. So. Mary probably won't be, so you'll be listening to Mary instead.
My whiteboard skills will improve a lot.
Mary's like that. Yeah. Beck?
Is that imperialistic view precluding a wider ethnically diverse audience being attracted to
And
that?
also precluding a wider religious audience, you know, because obviously one of the things we want to do, you know, there's nearly 4 billion people on the planet who are heavily involved in religion, in religious faith. And obviously we would like to reach them with the truth at some point. And then we also see that often many of the more humble countries, shall we call them, are more open to truth as well, initially in particular. And so, yeah, we have some ideas as to where we would like the first centres to be as a result of those things. There is a potential too of there being a centre in Europe, in Sweden, but again, it depends upon the people involved and their development. And at this stage, as you know, developing in a real way is actually, you know, requires getting rid of some addictions that most of us are pretty firmly entrenched with. And so, you know, developing in a real way often takes 10 to 15 years minimum to even get started, because you've got to work through a lot of your addictions and sins in order to get started. And so the average person's not really up to that, and the average person also isn't really that passionate about that, we find. So the average person listening to Divine Truth is used to sitting back in their lounge, looking at a video and going, oh yeah, most of that doesn't apply to me, sort of feeling.
I knew that already.
I knew that already, that kind of thing. And obviously, a lot of what we're teaching, people don't really understand in their hearts at all. And it takes time to actually understand things in your heart and actually to receive. We want every person who's the director of any organisation to have received God's love to the degree where we feel they have reached the second or third sphere of the Spirit of God, at least that, as a minimum. And unless that happens, then they can't be a member or director of God's Way until that occurs.
The worst thing we could do is sort of set things up before there was people really in the right condition to run it, because then it would go badly. It would require, if we wanted to sort of make it not go badly, it would require a lot more effort and energy from ourselves. And
we need to be able to travel. Right?
Yeah,
we need to be able to share truth all around the world. And if we're locked in one place, that doesn't allow us to share truth. It's taken us 8 years to get Australia into a state where we can travel again. And when I say it's taken us 8 years, it's 8 years of every single day of the week it's taken us to get 3 people who we feel we can trust to run God's Way organisation in Australia. And so we sort of expect that it's going to take a similar amount of time elsewhere. to do the same things.
This is why we would like to be able to travel each year, because it requires some consistent input. Yeah. And once then you have even 3 or 4 people in each location, it then becomes easier for the next people coming along and easier for the next people coming along, because there's already an established kind of an environment that it, as Phil said, it's like, oh, everyone here's more direct. Oh, everyone's more honest.
It's not just Jesus who's direct.
It's not just these guys.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Is. Like,
everyone. And this feels very different. I've never experienced this before. What the benefits of that can be like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Anything else we should add, though?
Yeah, probably our intention to just try when we are home to still.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
still share with people.
Yeah. So similar to what we've been doing here, we're hoping to do in Australia. If you remember, in my initial kind of announcement of this trip, we were going to call it a living room tour, and then very excellently, so many people were interested. We realised living rooms is not going to be big enough.
Not going to cover it.
Yeah, it's not going to cover it, so that's why we're in a hall. But our idea was to be able to, because we'd been having living room talks in Australia for a couple of years, really, in our own living room, with people who were a part of God's Way each week. And we saw the benefits of that, of people having this consistent input about their spiritual development, about what it's like to have a relationship with God. I wanted to try and give other people the experience of that, even a small taste of that. And that's why we started this trip. And as you can see, it's evolved a little bit to have bigger venues and bigger audiences. But when we return to Australia, depending on, again, it will depend on how many people in Australia are interested. We might do a living room tour, or we might end up in venues around Australia. But our idea is to do that for 2 months of the year. So not directly following this 4 months, I would say, is a safe bet.
We're going to be pretty tired,
yes.
I think, by the time we're done.
By the time we finish this, we'll probably need a couple of months at home to rest till the end of the year. We get home at the start of November. But maybe in January, February and March, somewhere in those 2 months within that 3 month period, we'll probably do some travel in Australia to just give some talks on whatever topic we feel is going to be helpful to the group that assembles in each of the places that we're going.
Also, Phoebe has provided a little room which has a good internet connection, because it's very hard in Australia to get a good internet connection where we are. And it's a fibre connection that allows us to do online sharing with people as well. So when we are back home, we may actually do live online, like YouTube, or probably not YouTube, because YouTube's getting more and more militant about what you're allowed to say. And we don't want to be restricted by what we feel we want to say or need to say. And so it'll probably be some other platform that we'll probably use in future for sharing all of our material. And that's something we're trying to work on in terms of what platform is also part of the problems that we're currently facing, and how to do whatever that platform is and still provide our services for free, because most of the platforms now are all charging for things, and if they don't charge, they advertise, and we don't like advertising either. So we'd like to get to the stage where we can just share on a platform, something like maybe Vimeo or some other kind of platform. But it is very hard when you're sharing to 10 to 20,000 people at a time, because they will charge you, like for that kind of streaming where you're doing 5 hours of streaming and there's 20,000 people in the audience, start charging every event $100,000, something like that. And so it's impossible for us to do those kind of things. So we're also trying to look at options like if I have more servers, and we make sort of like a server farm for sharing, but it's got to allow for potentially 10 to 20,000 people to be watching at the same time. And this is a very complex technical thing that most of these bigger places like YouTube have got thousands and thousands of servers to be able to do. But obviously we don't have that kind of funding at this stage to do these things.
And also it'd be fair to say, wouldn't it, that we are shifting away from this idea that broadcasting videos is really the most effective way to share.
It's completely ineffective.
It's not been effective as it is just meeting with people in person, which is why we're shifting to this idea of travelling a lot more.
Yeah.
But the studio at Phoebe's does give us the opportunity to have live conversations with people in or small groups in different locations who might be studying what we taught when we were with them
And
last
just want
time.
some clarification or something
They
like
have
that.
questions. They're more sincere about developing this relationship with God, and we might be able to help kind of keep things ticking along for them in the interim, in the 8 months that we're not in their location.
Mind you, obviously it's only 5 probably months that we'd be able to do that anyway, because then we're travelling again. We find when we're travelling is communication wherever we go is pretty difficult. It's been pretty good here. We had nearly 1 terabyte of data we've already collected so far, and I've managed now to upload that to back it up to our servers while I've been here. But normally, we can't do that wherever we are. In all of Europe, we didn't find a place that was fast enough where we could do that, except for here. So, it's very dependent on, us being able to upload things and download things. And, so there's a lot of things we look at when we're doing a trip, and one of the things is how do we share what we're sharing with you as soon as possible with what we share with everybody else? Because obviously we feel the information is important, but there's a lot of technical and other problems that we face trying to do that. Obviously, money problems too that we face doing that as well, because when you do it at the scale we're trying to do it, that's when people want to charge you a lot of money to do it as well.
Use your own satellite.
Need our own satellite.
Yeah, obviously that's not a very loving thing to do either, but it's difficult to work out what the most loving thing to do. But we feel the most loving thing, which is the way that it happens in the spirit world, is that a person who becomes in the condition of love themselves wants to share, and then they start sharing. And so in the end, the most effective means of sharing truth is for each person who learns it to the degree that they are in harmony with God's truth and love themselves, then generally also wants to share it. And if you get as many people as you can doing that, then it's like every person becomes like a source of truth. And the more sources of truth we have on the planet, the better everything's going to be, and the more things will get shared. So at this stage, what we're trying to do is create a set of resources that any of you can refer to when you're sharing truth with other people. And so that enables other people to go, okay, I can go to the source of that material and work on that material with people. So that that's what we're trying to do. But again, there's many limitations we have doing that. Obviously, we're just 2 people. We don't have a lot of helpers at all. A lot of people think we have a lot of, like a big, like a lot of YouTube channels have this big back end on them, where there's 10 to 20 editors, and we don't have any of that. We haven't found anybody who is willing to follow our directions and also loving enough with us when they're working with us to actually work with at this stage. So, those things will come in time, we believe. But at this stage, it's early days with regard to all of that. We have our plans, but we also only engage our plans in harmony with God's principles, not with the way the world would normally do it. So we don't agree with things like social media, for example, which is primarily created and functioning to basically feed your addictions more, is what its purpose is. And so we feel we can't engage such platforms. So if you ever hear of us being on Tinder or on Facebook,
TikTok now, he means we definitely won't be on TikTok.
TikTok, or whatever the platforms are, it's not us.
Twitter,
right? That's
it's not
right.
even called that.
I don't know what it's called now. But if you ever hear us being on those platforms, it's not us, it's somebody faking us. We're never going to be on any of those platforms. And in fact, what we're finding more and more is even platforms like YouTube are becoming more and more militant in what they allow you to say. we're getting, now all I got to do is mention, I won't say it because otherwise this video will get taken down as well. We've already had videos taken down. But all you got to do is mention something that they disagree with or something, and all of a sudden there's a whole heap of takedown notices on your videos. And so there's all those kind of problems that we're facing trying to share truth in a loving manner, but still for free with the world. Yeah. There's that mic, is it? Somebody? Yeah.
What is for any of us that want to share information about divine truth and truth, what is the most ethical way for us to do that? If we get it intellectually, which isn't getting it, I understand, we've not got it here, what is the most ethical way for us to be sharing?
Honestly, it's just like, I'm hearing this stuff and I'd recommend you have a look at it. That kind of thing. And a lot of times you can say what your experience has been, but it's very good to say it face to face. Face to face, people get to feel your feelings. See, when you do it on some kind of mechanical device, technical device, a lot of times people are not getting to feel your feelings. So it's good to do it face to face, but you can also do things like, this has been my experience. Set up your own channel on YouTube and say, this is my experience. But as you know, YouTube will eventually get to the point where they want to suppress some things that you say. They will. Every company on earth at the moment is going through this very large, unloving change where they're becoming more and more controlling. And they're becoming more and more controlling because they want to make more money out of you. And so sooner or later it's going to be difficult to even use any of these platforms because of those kind of reasons. But do whatever you can to share your own experience, but also make sure they understand where the truth comes from. A lot of people actually sharing our material as if it's their own, like as if they created it. And in fact, we find even that many of you thank the people who are editing videos more than you thank us for actually delivering the material. And that's a very interesting thing we've noticed as well. So quite often the people sharing the videos get all this thanks.
On this trip, yeah,
on
because
the
this is the first time we haven't shared the videos, but other people are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of appreciation for the other
For
people
them.
sharing.
But not much appreciation expressed to us for actually being there and doing it, which is interesting in itself. But it just shows you the addictions in play a lot of times. So the key is to remove your own addictions out of sharing with people, remove your own demands from people, and just here's some truth that I'm hearing that I feel is truth. Have a look at it, and and we don't see any problem with people getting together and just discussing the truth that they've heard and working out questions if that's what they want to do, and even asking us to get online with them at some point and have a discussion with them. That we don't see any problem with any of that. We do see a problem with a person claiming it's their own and they already know it, and also doing sort of what we would call what do you call it when you're helping people emotionally or psychologically, more sort of there's a word for it in the medical profession.
Counselling, no?
Well, counselling or therapy. Yeah, sorry about that. Forgot that altogether. And we don't really agree with therapy because therapy creates dependencies, and dependencies create a dependency on a person. And this is opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to achieve is you having a relationship with God, and through your interaction with God, you deal with everything because you desire it, not because someone therapied you into it, and not because somebody sort of pushed you into it or G'd you up. And nowadays they have with these fitness channels, come on, get into it, come on, all that kind of stuff. We're not interested in any of that. We're interested in a person having a sincere desire to work through their emotions. And when you do have a sincere desire to do it, you will find those emotions will come up very naturally for you. You'll be able to work through your own stuff. We want to see every person on the planet getting to the point where they don't need another person to feel their feelings. You feel confident in yourself. You can handle any feeling. And between you and God, you can sort out any truth. And that's where we would like to get people to be. And really we find a lot of things that go on in the guise of I'm helping a person with divine truth. No, they're not. They're helping a person with their own power issues or whatever, addictions really. And we don't agree with any of that. And if people email us, they'll soon find out we don't agree. But, for the most part, also, even when people say, oh, I'm doing this, what do you think of it? We can't reply because we get hundreds and hundreds of these emails per week. And what do you think of it? What do you think of it? Type emails. And to say what we think of it, like we'd have to write 10 pages or 20 pages of reply. And to be honest, the written word, unless you're very precise, the written word is a very difficult way to express truth. That's why we share a lot of things with you, face to face. So we find there's many ways you can share, but also many of the ways people choose to share are really not in harmony with what we would feel is loving ourselves.
The ethical way to do it is if you feel like you want to give a gift, not get an addiction through the process, or not pull all your friends and family along with you on the process, or you don't pull on the believe what I believe, so I don't have to
I'm
feel
going
like...
to put this into my therapy now. Well, while I do agree that some people do need therapy, they should be getting that therapy generally from a professional who is qualified and certified to give such therapy. Now, I don't see any problem with those professionals integrating principles of divine truth as long as they acknowledge where that came from, but it's unloving to not do so to a person. But also, it's sort of like you're setting yourself up to a dangerous situation, we feel, by putting yourself as an intermediary between God and the person, and which is the opposite thing of what we're trying to achieve. So we have a lot of quite strong feelings about a lot of the things that people attempt to do. We're trying to encourage you to develop your own desires and have your own relationship with God, and through that relationship heal anything this is inside of you. Every one of our brothers and sisters that are living in the celestial heavens have done that. Now, they have had some assistance, but it's always been from a person who has known more than them and who understands God's truth more than them and who has received more love from them. They've obviously in the spirit world, that's easier to tell because they come from a higher sphere to visit you. But here on earth, people can claim they're in a better position, and many people we know or know of do claim they're in a good position to share truth, and we feel they're in a much worse condition than the people they're sharing the truth with, oftentimes.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of, we're looking at it from God's perspective, not from people's perspective. So we feel very strongly you can encourage each other, you can share truth with each other. You even, like many of you probably never met each other before, right? Even in the same country, you can get together with each other, have discussions. But as soon as you enter this dynamic where one person is taking power over the group, or now that's in disharmony completely with our teachings, actually. Our reason for sharing with you is not about taking power over you. It's about just sharing you with the truth and letting you make decisions in your life, whether you want to make your life harmonious with that truth or not. Yeah.
Very important. Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's our plans. Thank you, Mary. So next week we're down at Damerham in the south.
I think we said Damerham.
Damerham? Isn't it Damerham? I don't know.
Damerham.
Yeah. Like Leicester. It's hard for us to get used to with Australia.
Lugabaruga.
Yeah. What's it called? Loughborough. And it's Loughborough.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We have a lot of funny names.
Yeah, in Australia we have a lot of Aboriginal names, so with towns and stuff like that. Yeah. But so that's we'll be
Is
there.
anyone joining us next weekend? A
Yeah.
few of you are.
Yeah, a few,
Nice.
quite a few.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so we'll see you down there. We will probably start. We're still considering about Sunday, because of how tired we are. So Sunday might be a cut down day for us next weekend because we're just getting pretty tired.
We'll see how much rest we get in
See how
the
much
next
rest
few
we get.
days.
Yeah, it depends upon our accommodation that we've chosen
How
down south as to how we go.
and also a little bit about how resistive the audience is.
Yeah.
Now you know, the more resistive you are, the more energy we put in, and the more open you are, the easier it is to talk forever.
Yeah. So we look forward to meeting you. Those of you who are going to be there, there's going to be obviously some newer people there too. Yeah. But we'll probably continue the same subjects with a bit more sort of specifics.
Specifics.
Specificity. To it. So, you know, that's probably going to be our subject next week. We hope to do a bit more mediumship.
Yeah, we'd like to do more mediumship. We just felt today that mediumship wasn't the right thing. The group wasn't ready for mediumship. Actually.
Yeah, a lot of the spirits here, they're ready now, ironically, so, but many of them at the start of the day wouldn't have responded anyway, so we thought it was better to discuss the things with you today that we have. So that's our goal next week, which will be Friday, I think we'll be there.
Yeah, we start Friday.
We're doing a setup on Thursday and we'll be there Friday. We have to be out of the venue at before 6 p.m, so that means we have to be fully packed up by 5 probably next week as well, at the latest, but I don't think we'll go that far.
I don't think we'll go that late anyway.
Yeah. I think that's it. And then we're off after that to the next week to Ireland. Yeah. So we'll be in Ireland, and I know some of you are joining us there. Some of the people are going to transport some of the equipment there, which is great.
Yeah, thanks again to everyone who's helped out this weekend.
Yeah,
guys, and
thanks again for the speakers, because we're going to be able to reuse the speakers now next week, and also in Ireland.
Yes. And hopefully in our new learning centre. That's coming soon to Europe. Thank you also for your donations, those of you who've donated to us.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think that's about it for us. Yeah. Now, many of you will feel like you want to come up and talk to us now, right? But we can't. I'm sorry.
We have to pack up.
We have to pack up, and we have to get everything quite properly packed so that when we unpack next week, we know where everything is. And the only way we can do that is by doing it ourselves, because we're going to every venue, obviously. And so Mary and I are responsible for our pack up here. We can help in some other ways, though. All of the chairs will need to be stacked. I'm not sure how high they were when they were brought out. They'll need to be not stacked inside, but taken out to the left hand.
So there's a storeroom.
There's a storeroom on the left hand and stacked in there.
Yeah.
And so you can help us out by doing that.
Yeah.
And also.
And stacked like with like, so there's grey chairs and brown chairs. The brown chairs must be stacked together and the grey ones together. Six high they are. And if someone wants to bring out, there's a trolley that you can actually stack them here and wheel them back in. Please take all of your personal belongings.
And rubbish, if we can too.
Yeah.
And those of you who are transporting gear to the next venue can just see you